Well, thanks again, Madam Speaker. And as I said before, it's always an honor to rise in this House, and it's great to be able to speak about such an important issue as what we are talking about here today, which is childcare, and in particular the Senate amendments. So, Madam Speaker, I mean, again, I guess the fact that we are back here today goes to show, so I'm sure my colleagues here today would agree, that there's always room for improvement when we are looking at any piece of legislation. But it's especially true when we're dealing with an NDP Liberal government, such as we are now. And that is what we tried to tell them during the regular process of debate the first time through. If this Liberal government decides that it wants to involve itself in something, it really needs to make sure that it gets things right and doesn't create a mess of things. As usual, these Liberals chose not to take their responsibility seriously. Instead, they tried to blame us and play political games at the expense of Canadian families. They claimed we were delaying the bill when we were simply doing our job as the official opposition. Our Parliament is set up in certain ways for a reason. We have to consider and review what the government does carefully, or else there's trouble. And look what happens if we don't. Was it a delay when a few months went by for senators to go through the bill and add this amendment? As a result, we are having another round of debate and a vote in the House. But in this case, that's probably a good thing. Many people agree from each party that the bill will be better for it. If we consider that it's dealing with childcare, which is a complex and important issue, I think it's fair to say that there are other things we also need to consider. We don't have to worry about a delay so much as the Liberal government making big announcements and rushing through legislation so they can try to look good and feel good about themselves. Canadians living in the real world have a lot of problems to face. They're counting on us to deliver solutions in the right way. Along with protecting official language minority communities, which is now reflected in C35, Conservatives propose other amendments which were rejected by the NDP Liberals, including, Mr. Speaker, an amendment which would have basically done the exact same thing that we are debating here today with this Senate amendment. Was voted down previously by the NDP Liberal government at committee. Mr. Speaker, the lack of respect for parents from this government is quite apparent. In different ways, we have heard members of the Liberal NDP government suggest that parents don't have the right to raise their own children. Recently, one of them went so far as to say that there is no such thing as parental rights. There is a dangerous idea which the far left has, and it seems to be gaining ground on that side. They think children should belong to the state and not to their parents.
Appel au règlement, je reconnais l'honorable député.
On a point of order.
In the House.
Nous allons vérifier.
We'll check.
Nous n'avons pas le quorum, donc...
We don't have quorum, so we're going to ring the bells.
Nous avons le quorum.
We do have quorum, so the honourable member can continue his speech. There's 15 minutes left.
Well, now they all come running back in to hear this marvelous speech, which I'm getting, despite the heckles from the NDP guys over here. But
We're going to talk about the far left.
All right. So, thankfully, we haven't got to the point yet that they want to get us to. But when we hear people deny the primary role of parents to raise their own children, that's the line of thinking that will start to take us in a dangerous direction. Our approach to childcare must respect parents and their choices. We can't expect the NDP Liberal coalition to get things right if they don't have that solid foundation to begin with. Speaker, childcare is crucial. Canadian parents know it better than anyone. As Conservatives, we want to meet the needs of families, and we understand how valuable and important it is to do so. It's common sense, especially in today's world, which moves at a rapid pace. We need to maintain and support the family unit. Children are a gift. Those of us who are parents know how much they change our lives. They give us purpose and direction. They bring joy and pride as they grow up, despite some of the difficulties that we sometimes have to go through as parents with our kids. Not to sound too cliche, but our kids are the future of society. That's why it's so important that we provide the right support to parents as they raise the next generation. There are people out there looking for options that are affordable and help to build the lifestyle they want for their family. For many, it's a struggle, and I've heard about it in my own riding, which is largely rural. Last month at a town hall in East End, as I was talking about at the beginning, I was asked about the lack of access and spaces in our area. It confirmed for me that not much has changed since I did, or as part of another town hall in Maple Creek a couple of years ago, where one of the prominent issues was also childcare. I would say that as the most rural province, Saskatchewan is in a unique situation. We have so many small towns that are so spread out, so there is an especially stark contrast between urban and rural. The access to childcare is linked to our access to workers. Business owners in the Southwest are struggling to hire, but it wasn't a shortage of applicants. It was a shortage of daycare facilities for potential hires to have their kids taken care of. So unfortunately, these interviewees moved on, got another job outside of Maple Creek, and left these businesses still wanting. What's sad, Mr. Speaker, is that Maple Creek is just a phenomenal town. Houses are still decently affordable, the school is great, and it's not too far from the Cypress Hills. It's a quick drive to some of the other major centres in both Alberta and Saskatchewan. It's just an all-around great place for a family. Yet people are choosing to not raise their kids there, in part because they can't find access to childcare. We want to see this bill include a wide range of childcare options, which should be available to parents. And that's what the NDP Liberals rejected. You know, one of the amendments that we had proposed was to make sure that we included all types of providers, private providers, home-based providers, alongside public and not-for-profit providers, just to make sure that all types of home care options are eligible. In fact, in Saskatchewan, there's over 87,574 children under age 6 in our province, but the majority of them are not in licensed care and receive no benefit from the implementation of the government's child care strategy. This government has a one-size-fits-all approach for parents. The bill says to Canadians, it's okay, don't worry about it, let the government take care of your kids. And that's basically it. The bill overlooks many families who want to have some other options, including stay-at-home parents. But many Canadians don't want that from the government. They believe that what is best for their family is that they stay home with the kids and live off of one income. By no means is it easy, and I'm speaking from my own personal experience. It requires determination and sacrifice, but for my family and for thousands and thousands of Canadians, the right decision is to have a stay-at-home parent. Last time when I spoke on this bill, I did share my own family's experience with stay-at-home parenting, and I'd like to touch on that point once again here. Shortly after my wife and I were married, and while our first child was on the way, we sat down and we discussed how we can make it work for my wife to be a stay-at-home mom, because that was something that she truly wanted and was near and dear to her heart. And we also thought that that was what would be best for our kids in the long run. The decision to live on one income was definitely an adjustment, and we got by for nearly a decade until she went back to work in 2019 when the kids were old enough. Mr. Speaker, I would suggest that we are better off for it. You know, some of the adventures that we had driving our old minivan, different things like that, where we had to make decisions on buying older, more well-used vehicles to make sure that we could make ends meet, was definitely part of the joy and the struggle at times of being deciding to live on one income and to have my wife be a stay-at-home parent. But now, yes, we supported this bill because there are Canadians, Mr. Speaker, who are in different situations and make other choices, and they are looking for support too. Not all Canadians can survive on one income. We know that, we get that, especially with the cost of living crisis spiraling out of control because of this government. But for those who are able and choose to do so, they are completely overlooked by this Liberal government. Instead of supporting Canadians who choose to live as independently of government as possible, this government continues to throw program and program at Canadians as if they can't run their own lives. Last June, the member for Milton said to me, and I'll quote, "When women go back to work, they tend to earn money and pay taxes, and that pays for programs like this. I would like the member to appreciate that." End quote. But Speaker, I didn't need him to tell me that. There are mothers who work and contribute to our economy. But my point is this: parents are more than just simply taxpayers. The family is the basis of society, not the government. Strong parents make stronger families, and altogether they make for a strong society. If a woman doesn't want to go back to work after she has kids, we shouldn't just let her. We should help her. For the member to consider that women are nothing more than a taxpayer is a frightening insinuation. Does the Liberal government just view Canadians, especially Canadian moms, as just a source of income? If so, that's really worrying. The state is not the be-all, end-all solution for everything. Parents don't get up in the morning and head out the door to their jobs thinking with pride about the taxes that are going to be carved out of their paychecks, but rather about how to pay for the food that their children are going to eat, about how they're going to pay for the mortgage that puts a roof over their heads, but how they're going to make enough money, save enough money to hopefully go on a holiday, go on a vacation, or maybe have their kids sign up to play hockey or put their kids in gymnastics, or have their kids take music lessons, some of the finer things that we are able to do as Canadian citizens. But you can't put a dollar value on parenting. It is certainly not $10 a day. Parenting, for many of us, is something that we are in our bones, is what we are created for. This government is looking at Canadians, thinking about its return on investment, and not how it can support Canadians living life the way they want to, including as a stay-at-home parent. A mother that chooses to leave the workforce is not an extra cost to society. She is not a burden or a strain or a negative by any stretch of the imagination. Moms are not a commodity to be given a dollar value. People have tried to determine the hourly cost of motherhood, that a mom's work is worth about $180,000 a year. Mr. Speaker, the work of a mother is absolutely priceless. You can't put a dollar value on it. This line of thinking, with the government's belief that women must get back to work to pay their taxes, inherently devalues that work, the sacrifice, and the unconditional love that mothers give. While childcare might be $10 a day with the rollout of this bill, there can never be a price put on being a mom or a dad for that matter. Our kids are our future, and their youngest years are the most important years of their life. Don't you think that mom and dad should be with them as much as possible during that time frame? The role of the government is to act in the best interest of its citizens. So why aren't we doing everything in our power to ensure that our children have the strongest start possible? As I said, this bill is narrow. It ignores and leaves behind other child care options. Back home, we know that many families share child care responsibilities. Family friends are all brought to someone's house, and a stay-at-home parent takes care of them all for the day. No government intervention, no subsidies, just community coming together to find a solution to their needs. Canadians that rely on others for their child care, people from their church, their neighbors, their co-workers, should be encouraged to do just that. But they shouldn't be forced to put their kids into a government-sanctioned daycare. For the private child care groups put together between friends, for the stay-at-home moms who choose to leave the workforce because they see the value in spending every day with their kids, this government leaves them wanting. The government must do more to tackle affordability and to enable parents to spend time with their kids. Parents know their kids better than anyone and will love their kids more than anyone else ever will. This government should not encourage the separation of child and parent, but should be actively working towards a country in which parents can spend as much time with their kids as possible. 53% of child care centers in the country are licensed and therefore excluded. They're unlicensed and therefore excluded from this legislation. And so too are the 35% of parents whose child is not in childcare, as they would rather stay at home with them. Whether you're from urban or rural Canada, Vancouver or Swift Current, Toronto or Shaunavon, childcare is something all Canadians need. Whether it's private, at a co-op, or maybe it's over at your grandparents' house. It could be a stay-at-home parent or a group of parents that have agreed to cycle taking care of the kids. However it presents itself, we know that this bill overlooks nearly all of those people. That doesn't even consider the fact that this scheme doesn't do anything to create new spaces. It is not growing access, which for people in the Southwest matters the most. In Saskatchewan, only 10% of kids aged 0 to 12 have access to daycare, either full or part-time. Between the ages of 0 and 6, the ages managed by the agreement between the Government of Saskatchewan and the Government of Canada, that's just under 18%. For example, there was one daycare facility in Saskatoon. They've got 90 spots available in their day home. And she said that her waiting list for people to come is 1,900 people on that waiting list. That's 1,900 kids and families who are being overlooked by this government. Sure, the government might be trying to make daycare more affordable, but if Canadians can't get their kids into the daycare, where is the benefit? Across the provinces, we see some different approaches when it comes to delivering access to education, for example. When I come over here to Ontario and hear something in the news about how the multiple school boards work, it sounds different from the arrangements we have made in Saskatchewan or from how education funding is delivered in Alberta. Each province is responsible for its own needs in that area. We need to see the same respect shown to provinces when it comes to early child care as well. If I can, I also want to say something which my Quebec colleagues might appreciate. I hope we can work together to find some common ground whenever possible. Our friends over in Quebec already have their own child care system, which has been running for decades already. I have to admit that I'm not completely familiar with all of the details of child care in Quebec or with discussions they're having about it in that part of the country, but they generally do seem to be happy with it. That was long before this government in Ottawa brought forward their version of a program for national child care at the federal level. They shouldn't take the credit for what Quebec is doing. They also shouldn't assume that what works in one province will work exactly the same in other provinces. There are different histories, cultures, and values to consider. The choice of parents matters the most. We need to expand their choices and not limit them, including through an affordability crisis. At the end of the day, a lot of the problem they face comes down to is a country where people can barely afford to live at all. After all, 51% of Canadians are $200 away from bankruptcy. Most women in Canada are having fewer children than they want to, and it's partly because they can't deal with the economic burden that does come with parenthood. The root of the problem isn't childcare, it's affordability. It's the fact that Canadians aren't earning enough money to raise a family. The government shouldn't be putting a Band-Aid on the problems created by this government with social programs. It needs to address the very real concerns faced by Canadians so they can have the kids that they want and that they can raise them however they want without the government telling them what exactly it is that they are supposed to be doing. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.